If you are the kind of person who feels the pain of others before you even understand your own, the world has already marked you as food. Not because people are evil in some cartoonish way, not because every stranger is secretly plotting your downfall, but because the world is built to move forward on friction, and you are built to dissolve in it. Music. You walk into rooms carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions on your back, and you call that kindness. You call that being music a good person. You call that being human. But what no one tells you is that excessive music empathy, unguarded empathy, empathy without teeth, does not make you noble. It makes you predictable. It makes you pliable. It makes you the easiest piece on the board to remove without music. Resistance. There is a dangerous lie sold to sensitive people. The lie is that if you are kind enough, patient enough, understanding music enough, the world will eventually soften in response. That cruelty melts when music touched by compassion. That people who take advantage of you will one day wake up and feel ashamed. This lie feels beautiful. It feels moral. It feels like the kind of story you want to believe about reality. But reality does not run on stories. Reality runs on incentives. And when music, the incentive structure of the world, notices that you give without boundaries, forgive without memory, and sacrifice without condition, it adapts around you. It learns how to use you, not always consciously, often instinctively. Like water finding the lowest point to settle, people find the path of least resistance. And you, with all your open doors and unlocked gates, become that path. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable about human nature long before modern psychology. Put polite language around it. People do not move primarily by what is right. They move by what benefits them, what protects them, what elevates them, and what allows them to avoid pain. Morality often comes later, if it comes at all. This does not mean people are monsters. It means people are animals who learn to speak. They still respond to pressure, to advantage, to fear, to reward. When you present yourself as endlessly understanding, endlessly forgiving, endlessly accommodating, you are not inspiring moral growth in others. You are signaling that there is no cost to crossing you. You are teaching them that your boundaries are imaginary, that your pain is negotiable, that your time is available for consumption. The world eats what does not resist it. Not violently, not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, politely. It eats your energy first. You become the person everyone vents to, the person everyone leans on, the person who is always there. You pride yourself on being strong for others, but inside, you feel strangely empty. You feel drained in a way that sleep does not fix. You feel heavy, like you are carrying stones that no one else sees. Then it eats your time. Your goals get postponed because someone else needs you. Your dreams get delayed because someone else is struggling. Your life becomes a series of pauses in service of other people's emergencies. Then it eats your self-respect. You start rationalizing disrespect because you understand where it comes from. You excuse manipulation because you can see the wounds behind it. You forgive patterns that keep repeating because you believe in people more than you believe in evidence. And finally, it eats your sense of self. You become so attuned to everyone else's emotions that you lose the ability to hear your own. There is a difference between empathy and selfer. True empathy does not require you to become a doormat. Understanding someone's pain does not obligate you to let them bleed on your carpet. Compassion does not mean consenting to be harmed. But the sensitive mind confuses these things. It mistakes endurance for virtue. It mistakes tolerance for wisdom. It mistakes silence for peace. And in doing so, it hands over power to those who are not burdened by the same internal rules. Machiavelli would not tell you to become cruel. He would tell you to become realistic. He would tell you that if you insist on being good in a world that is not, you must be good with strategy, not just with feeling. Otherwise, your goodness will be harvested by those who have learned to weaponize your softness. Look at the patterns, music, in your life. The friendships where you give more than you receive. The relationships where you apologize, music, even when you are the one hurt. The workplace is where your reliability becomes a reason to pile more onto your plate without recognition. This is not music coincidence. This is the natural outcome of unprotected empathy in an environment that rewards efficiency over fairness. People do not wake up thinking today, I will exploit the music kind person. They wake up thinking, how do I survive today? How do I get what I need? How do I avoid discomfort? And when you make yourself the easiest source of emotional labor, of forgiveness, music, of support, of flexibility, you become the solution to their problems. Solutions are used often until they break. There is a harsh clarity in music, recognizing that your empathy, when unguarded, does not just attract those in pain. It attracts those who prefer not to carry their own pain. It attracts those who outsource responsibility for their emotions. It attracts those who sense, sometimes unconsciously, that you will hold their mess for them. And because you are wired to understand rather than confront, you tolerate patterns that would make a colder person walk away. You stay in situations that cost you more than they give you, because you can see the good in people, even when the good is buried under layers of behavior that hurt you. You tell yourself that love means endurance. You tell yourself that loyalty means staying. You tell yourself that being a good person means not making things uncomfortable. But discomfort is often the only language that teaches people where the line is. What is one uncomfortable boundary, music, you know you need to set this week? Write it in the comments to increase the chances of you actually doing it by 100%. It's time to stop paying for other people's comfort with your peace. Machiavelli's reputation suffers because people confuse his realism with malice. He was not advocating for cruelty for its own sake. He was describing the terrain as it is, not as we wish it to be. In that terrain, those who are purely gentle are not admired for long. They are managed, they are maneuvered, they are kept close for utility and distant for power. The world respects boundaries because boundaries introduce consequence. Without consequence, your kindness becomes a resource others feel entitled to. With consequence, your kindness becomes a choice they must value. You might think that being firm will make you cold, that protecting yourself will make you less human, that saying no will turn you into the very thing you dislike in others. But there is a difference between being heartless and being armored. Armor does not remove the heart, it protects it. The person who feels deeply but sets limits is not less compassionate. They are more sustainable. They can continue to care without being consumed. The person who feels deeply and refuses to set limits eventually burns out, becomes bitter, or collapses into numbness. The irony is that excessive empathy, when it leads to exhaustion, often ends in less empathy. You go from feeling too much to feeling nothing because feeling everything without defense is unbearable. You also need to learn to disappoint people. Not out of spite, not out of ego, but out of respect for your own finite resources. Every yes you give is a no to something else. When your empathy forces you to say yes to everyone, you are saying no to yourself in small, invisible ways that accumulate into resentment. Music and resentment poisons kindness. It turns generosity into obligation. It turns care into currency. Music. You start keeping score in your head. Even if you pretend you are above that, you begin to feel unseen, unappreciated, taken for granted, not because people are evil, but because you taught them that your limits do not exist. The world will not reward you for bleeding quietly, music. It will assume you can keep bleeding. If you want to move through reality without being consumed by it, you have to integrate a hardness into your softness. Not cruelty, but firmness. Not indifference, but discernment. Not suspicion of everyone, but clarity about patterns. Empathy without boundaries is not virtue. It is vulnerability without defense. And vulnerability without defense is not brave in a world that does not guarantee mercy. Before we continue, if you're finding truth in this so far, music, I'd appreciate a like. And if you want to hear from me again, make sure you're subscribed. Let's keep going. Now you will begin to notice that the people who benefit the most from your empathy are rarely the ones who grow because of it. They grow accustomed to it. They settle into it like a warm room they never intend to leave. Your understanding becomes the atmosphere they breathe, not the lesson that challenges them to change. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your role in their life shifts from being a person to being a function. You are the listener, the forgiver, the one who always sees their side, the one who absorbs the emotional shock so they music don't have to. You tell yourself that this is love, that this is loyalty, that this is what it means to be mature. But maturity without boundaries is not wisdom. It is self-neglect dressed up as virtue. The uncomfortable truth is that people treat you according to the rules. You allow them to learn about you. If every violation is met with understanding instead of consequence, you are not teaching compassion. You are teaching permission. You are teaching that your limits are flexible to the point of irrelevance. Over time, this does something subtle to the people around you. They stop considering your emotional reality as something solid. Your feelings become a background noise that can be tuned out because they know you will rationalize their behavior for them. You become predictable in your forgiveness, predictable in your patience, predictable in your willingness to stay. Predictability is safety for those who want to act without restraint. Machiavelli would call this a failure of power, not of morality. Power in its simplest form is the ability to influence outcomes. When you refuse to ever impose consequence, you relinquish influence. You become a fixed point others can move around without adjusting themselves. This does not make you noble. It makes you irrelevant in the arena of change. The paradox is that the people who actually change others for the better are rarely the ones who tolerate everything. They are the ones whose presence introduces a cost to destructive behavior, not through cruelty, but through withdrawal, through refusal, through the quiet message that access to them is conditional on respect. There is a reason why certain people are treated with care even when they are kind. It is not because they are less empathetic. It is because their empathy is selective. It is given where it is met with responsibility. It is withdrawn where it is exploited. This selectivity creates gravity. People feel the weight of their presence. They know that crossing certain lines changes the relationship in tangible ways. This is not manipulation. This is clarity. It is the difference between being loved for who you are and being used for what you provide. The fear that keeps you from setting these limits is often rooted in abandonment. You worry that if you become music less accommodating, less endlessly available, less forgiving, you will lose people. And you are right about one thing. You will lose some people, but you will not lose the people who value you as a person rather than as a resource. You will lose those who were attached to the version of you that made music their life easier at your expense. This loss feels painful because it forces you to confront the possibility that some connections were transactional even if they were wrapped in emotional language. Letting go of that illusion hurts, but keeping it costs you more in the long run. There is a deeper layer to excessive empathy that rarely gets talked about. Sometimes it is not just about caring for others. Sometimes it is about avoiding your own conflict. When you focus obsessively on understanding everyone else, you don't have music to face the discomfort of asserting yourself. You don't have to risk being seen as difficult. You don't have to tolerate the tension that comes with saying no. In this way, unguarded empathy becomes a shield against your own fear of confrontation. It feels virtuous, but it is also protective of your anxiety. You choose the pain of being taken advantage of over the pain of being misunderstood. One is familiar, the other is terrifying. Machiavelli would recognize this pattern immediately. He would see that your moral posture is also a strategic posture, even if you don't consciously intend it to be. You are choosing the strategy of appeasement. In a world that does not reward appeasement with security, appeasement invites escalation. The more you give without condition, the more is expected of you. This is not because people are inherently greedy. It is because expectations adjust to what is consistently provided. If you always make space for others, they stop making space for you, not out of malice, but out of habit. The turning point comes when you realize that boundaries are not walls meant to isolate you. They are filters meant music to protect what matters. They do not make you less empathetic. They make your empathy meaningful. When your care is no longer automatic, it becomes intentional. When your forgiveness is no longer guaranteed, it becomes valuable. When your presence is no longer endlessly available, it becomes something people learn to treat with respect. This is not about playing games. It is about aligning your inner values with the external reality of how human behavior actually works. You might feel a moral discomfort when you first begin to change this pattern. You might feel selfish. You might feel cold. You might even feel guilty for prioritizing yourself. This guilt is not evidence that you are doing something wrong. It is evidence that you have been conditioned to equate self-protection with selfishness. There is a profound difference between caring for yourself and caring only about yourself. One allows you to continue showing up in the world without being consumed by it. The other isolates you. What you are learning is not to withdraw from humanity, but to engage with it from a position of strength rather than depletion. There is also a quiet dignity in allowing people to experience the consequences of their behavior. When you constantly cushion the impact of others' actions, you rob them of the feedback necessary for growth. Your empathy in that case becomes an obstacle to their development. By stepping back, by refusing to always rescue, you are not being cruel. You are allowing reality to teach what your kindness kept shielding them from. This is a harder form of compassion because it requires you to tolerate the discomfort of watching people struggle. But struggle is often the soil in which responsibility grows. The world does not need you to be less empathetic. It needs you to be less available to exploitation. It needs you to pair your sensitivity with discernment, to recognize that not every story deserves your sacrifice, music. Not every wound deserves your bleeding. Not every person who understands your kindness deserves your continued presence, music. There is strength in being able to feel deeply and still walk away, music. There is power in caring and still choosing yourself when the cost of caring becomes self-destruction. This is the kind of strength music that does not announce itself, it does not posture, it simply refuses to be consumed. At some point you are forced to confront a simple, brutal question. Is your empathy making the world kinder, or is it making your world smaller? Music. Look closely at the trajectory of your life. Are you expanding into your potential, or are you orbiting around the needs, moods, and crises of others? The answer to this question is not philosophical, it is practical. It shows up in your calendar, in music, your energy levels, in the distance between who you are and who you could have been if your time and attention, music, were not constantly siphoned away. Machiavelli would tell you that power is not about domination. It is about leverage. Leverage is what allows you to shape the conditions around you instead of being shaped by them. When your empathy is unguarded, you surrender leverage. You give others the ability to dictate the emotional terms of your life. You become reactive rather than deliberate. Your mood rises and falls with the state of people around you. Their chaos becomes your weather. This is not noble, it is destabilizing. A person who cannot regulate their access to others' emotions becomes a satellite endlessly pulled into orbits that are music, not their own. There is a quiet discipline required to remain empathetic without being absorbed. It begins with the recognition that you are not responsible for fixing everyone you understand. Music. Understanding is not obligation. Compassion is not consent. You can see someone's pain without volunteering to carry it. This distinction feels cold at first because you have been taught that care means sacrifice. But sacrifice without strategy is simply loss. Sacrifice with intention is choice. The former drains you. The latter aligns you with a purpose you consciously accept. Notice how often you feel compelled to explain yourself when you set a boundary. You offer long justifications. You soften your refusal. You cushion your no with apologies. This reveals how deeply you fear being seen as unkind. But kindness that requires you to erase yourself is not kindness, it is submission. When you begin to state your limits plainly without excessive emotional labor to manage others' reactions, you will feel exposed. Some people will react with disappointment. Some will test your resolve. A few will attempt to guilt you back into the role you used to play. This is not proof that you are becoming worse. It is proof that you are changing the terms of access to you. There is a moment of loneliness that often follows this shift. The noise of constant emotional engagement fades, and you are left with more silence than you are used to. This silence can feel like emptiness if your identity has been built around being needed. But this space is not a void. It is room. Room for your own thoughts, room for your own projects, room for your own healing. The world does not suddenly become warmer when you overextend yourself. It becomes quieter when you stop doing so. And in that quiet, you finally hear your own voice again. Machiavelli's realism cuts through the fantasy that being endlessly good will be reciprocated with endless goodness. Reciprocity is conditional. Respect is earned through consistency. When people learn that you respect yourself enough to walk away from disrespect, they adjust their behavior around you. Not all of them. Some will leave. Some will reveal that they were only present because you were useful. Let them go. Their absence is information. It tells you which relationships were sustained by your self-neglect. It clears space for connections that can exist without consuming you. This does not mean you become calculating in a cold, cynical way. It means you become conscious of the exchange of energy in your life. You begin to notice who replenishes you and who depletes you. You begin to notice which environments respect your limits and which erode them. You start making choices not music just based on how much you understand someone's pain, but on how much your presence in their life aligns with your own growth. This is not cruelty. It is stewardship of your finite life. The world will continue to contain suffering. You will continue to encounter people who are hurting, confused, and flawed. Your empathy will still be a gift, but a gift is only a gift when it is given freely, not when it is extracted through guilt or expectation. When you learn to withhold your empathy from situations that harm you, you do not become less human. You become more whole. Wholeness is what allows you to offer care without losing yourself in the process. Music. There is a strange freedom in accepting that you cannot save everyone and that it is not your role to try. This acceptance does not make you indifferent. It makes you grounded. You begin to act from a place of choice rather than compulsion. You help when you can do so without self-betrayal. You step back when helping becomes a pattern of self-abandonment. Music. Over time, this reshapes your relationships. The people who remain learn to meet you with greater responsibility because your presence is no longer guaranteed regardless of how they treat you. The world eats what does not resist it. But resistance does not have to be violent. Resistance can be quiet. It can be the simple refusal to continue patterns that hollow you out. It can be the calm decision to leave environments that thrive on your overextension. It can be the internal shift from proving your goodness through suffering to embodying your worth through self-respect. In this resistance, your empathy does not disappear. It becomes tempered by wisdom. It becomes something that flows from strength rather than from depletion. And in that balance, you stop being food for the world and start becoming a force that moves through it without being consumed.